Thank you, Jeremy, and welcome to Exploring Early Literacy and/or Exploring Early Learning. I do use both terms interchangeably, so I will go back and forth with both of those terms. Currently, I'm working at the Lindenhurst Memorial Library. I'm also a member of the New York State Ready to Read training cohort, which I'll talk about shortly. And I also write a bi-monthly column for School Library Journal called First Steps, which looks at early learning in public libraries. So welcome. So some of you might have seen part of this presentation up at NYLA in Lake Placid. I find this quote here by Michael Wesch, a cultural anthropologist, really interesting in that right now the big talk in libraries is about ebooks, equal access to technology and the digital divide, and a technology gap. And he sees a potential for what he's calling a curiosity gap. And I find that fascinating when we're talking about early learning and early literacy because we've become a very busy society. We don't take the time really to do the typical social things that we used to do, such as talking to one another in person, playing. Everything seems to be scheduled and classroom-based, for lack of a better term, with young children. And really there's a definite need for letting young children explore their imagination, explore their environment, to be curious. We need to let kids be curious in order to ignite their early learning capabilities. And a public library is really a great fit for that, because play-based learning is essential, especially for young minds that are still growing. And public libraries are one of probably the only open and freely accessible community centers in your neighborhood that we welcome everyone. So that's really what makes us a perfect place to offer early learning opportunities, not only in our programming, but just on our public floor, and what we have available in our children's departments for our patrons to come and explore and use in the library instead of in their own home. So what is early literacy when I keep talking about early literacy? Early literacy basically is what children know about communication, language, reading and writing before they can actually read or write. So with a toddler, you might see them thinking or asking lots and lots of questions out loud. You know, what are books? How do they work? What is a pattern? How does this puzzle fit together? Can I eat this? Everything goes in their mouth. If I throw paper, it falls to the ground. So another way of thinking about early literacy is to think of it as early opportunities. And libraries can give those early opportunities to their youngest patrons through our programs and services. So that's one of the things to ask yourself early on. I like to do evaluations periodically in my professional life, the types of programs and things that are going on in my library. Am I giving my community opportunities to engage in early learning through my program or library services? Hopefully everyone can answer yes in some way to that. Perhaps you want to offer more, which is great, and I'm going to show you some examples of things that you can do. Most of you probably have heard this. I'm just going to give you some quick facts about early learning. Children learn almost half of everything that they learn in a lifetime by age 5. My 15-year-old likes this and wants to use this as a basis of why do I need to go to high school then. But 80% of brain development actually does occur during the early childhood years of birth to 5. In New York State, in 2015, and these statistics are taken directly from the 0 to 3 website, which is on your handouts, 62% of moms in New York State are in the labor force with infants. So think about who's coming to your library, and if you perhaps say, well, we don't get a lot of babies at our programs, then think, when are you doing those programs? Because if you're only doing programming, for example, during the day, you might be missing moms who are working full-time. So you might want to look at adding either a night class or a weekend early learning program for them. About 50% of parents or family members in New York State say that they read daily to a child under the age of 5, and 57% of parents or family members say that they share stories and sing to their children under the age of 5 every day. So these are good numbers, but they could be better, and the public library is a perfect place for us to share with parents and caregivers why it's so important for them to be talking, especially talking to their young children. So why words count? This is, again, a study. This is based on Hart and Riesly. This was done in the early 90s, and it compared vocabulary and just literally words, the word gap that children heard at home. And the less words that a child hears over their young lifetime, the less ready they're going to be when they get to school. So this information up on this slide is from a different study that shows that the typical middle-class child is entering first grade with 1,000 to 1,700 hours of one-to-one picture book reading, somebody sharing stories with them. A child from a low-income family is averaging just 25 hours of one-to-one picture book sharing. This is a huge discrepancy and really is one of the basis of where that word gap comes from. So an example, too, of a word gap is what the study has found is that parents in those lower income families are not talking as much. They're not using descriptive language. They're using more directive language. Get in the car. Put that down. Don't do that. Don't touch. Whereas in a middle class or upper middle class family, the language is much more descriptive. So in a library setting, one of the things we can do during a play-based class, for example, is as we're walking around and just talking, we can be using ourselves rich descriptive language where we're asking open-ended questions. We are giving prompts during storybook reading so that families can practice these tips at home as well and start learning. They really do need to learn how to talk more to their children. And that also is part of the whole rushing of our society these days. This next slide, a lot of these my slides, hold on, are not going through. The next slide is going to give you a lot of the different partners that are on the handout. And my slides are not working. Hold on one second, folks. Most of the organizations that are on the next slide are on your handouts. So we're looking at things like Reading is Fundamental, the Ready to Read at New York Library site, the Ask Babies Need Words campaign. Hold on one second. There we go. Hopefully they don't start automatically going through really crazy now because I just hit things like a gazillion times. These are some really great starting points for you if you are looking for information on early learning and ways that you can increase your programs and services. The Family Reading Partnership is based upstate, Ithaca, New York. Family Place Libraries is local to Long Island in Center Reach, New York. Their website is on your handout, and they have a entire training curriculum that your library can sign up to become a Family Place Library. It's a national network. The Ready to Read at New York Libraries logo on the upper right, if you go to that website, which is on the handout, you will find a ton of different resources on early learning. One of my favorites that you can put directly on your website is the day-by-day family literacy calendar. This is a really simple laid out family literacy calendar where it gives you a nursery rhyme or a finger play to do with a child every single day. It's different. The content changes. There is an e-book, an e-picture book on there that you can share together on the computer. So for families that don't have books at home, they can share books together still. There might be activities or little craft suggestions on there as well. It's very, very well laid out. The content, again, changes every day, but you can look at past content for the month to see the rhymes and the finger plays and songs again. If you're looking for what I call down and dirty, really quick, I want to get something up and running, look at Babies Need Words Every Day by ELSC, and also the Read Aloud 15 Minutes campaign. These are two websites that have spent a lot of money on graphics, on design. They have posters, brochures, pamphlets for parents, book lists, really simple things that you can, if you have a color printer or just even a black and white printer, you can print out high quality looking materials to share immediately with your patrons as you're starting to build resources yourselves. Okay, so what is reading? When we talk about early learning in a library, reading obviously is sharing books, but it's also about sharing stories and language. And sometimes we do that not through books, but through play, through open-ended art activities, making stories up, putting up flannel boards, retelling the endings of stories, looking for a what-if effect. Reading for a baby might very well involve a little chewing and gnawing on a word book as they see what is this object in front of me, and lots of singing and talking. Basically, reading to me in an early learning setting, I like to call it controlled chaos. And obviously, one of the reasons it's controlled chaos is because babies and toddlers often do not sit still. So a baby, toddler, early learning story time, we might call it a story time, and I might even suggest changing the title, because doing so, I think, brings up the era of a more old-fashioned story time where the children are going to sit quietly. Somebody is going to, hush, open up a book and read to them, and they're all going to sit there mesmerized and not move a muscle as somebody reads them a story. That doesn't happen in baby and toddler land, right? They're going to be up. If you have props, they're going to want to touch your sheep puppet or your pig puppet. They're going to be pulling things off of your flannel board. They're going to be singing when you're not singing. They're going to be crying when you are singing, if you have a voice like me. And it's just controlled chaos. And you kind of have to have a plan and then throw the plan out the window and kind of go the way that your babies and toddlers are going. So a reading program for them is going to involve a lot more movement. It's going to involve a lot more finger plays and motion activities to keep them engaged. You're going to want to use not just books, but sturdier books like board books or big books. You might want to use a projector. You want to switch it up a lot because babies have short attention spans. So you want to constantly have a kind of more almost frenetic pace than you would in a traditional story time, because you have to have a lot of tricks in your pocket to keep them occupied. The book itself might not do it, but if you give parents a copy of the book and now they're sitting with their child and looking at the book at the same time you are, having their own copy of the book sometimes keeps them where they're going and staying in that lap. 5 of the best things you can do when we're talking about early learning and best practices is Every Child Ready to Read's 5 best practices here of talking, singing, reading, writing, and playing, and incorporating at least 1 or 2 of these items in every early learning opportunity that you put out in your library. The New York State Ready to Read initiative recently provided training to most New York State library systems on Every Child Ready to Read and family literacy, and that training included giving library systems an Every Child Ready to Read manual that their libraries can borrow. So if you haven't heard about this, you can contact your youth services coordinator at your library system or the person there that oversees youth services and ask to borrow the Every Child Ready to Read manual, because it really is filled with practical ideas on how you can set up, if you've never done, for example, a toddler story time. There are scripts in there that you can follow. If you want to change your preschool story times, you can borrow this manual and find scripts for doing professional workshops, parent and child workshops, and really good ideas on books, finger plays, and examples of what to include in your programming. One of the things that I really like to do with babies and toddlers, though, is focus on nursery rhymes. Some of it is simple because I have a good shot that some of the parents in the room are going to know the words already to these nursery rhymes. So it won't be as off-putting to them, or parents often get anxiety in story time. I don't know if you've noticed this. They look at the library staff as, you know, we are an Oscar-winning actress or actor, and they can't possibly read a story the way we do. And we all know that that's not true. So sometimes using nursery rhymes is a really nice icebreaker because it's something that a good chunk of the people in the room know. I say that as you're reading on this slide on the bottom. It's really interesting. There was a journal, and I gave you the link there for the full article if you want to look at it, that today just 50% of our younger parents know all of the words to what we would consider traditional nursery rhymes. I find that interesting because in Mem Fox's book, Reading Magic, she cited research that test results that showed children who knew only just eight nursery rhymes by heart by the age of 4 were usually among the best readers by the time they were in 3rd grade. If you think of the amount of time libraries spend doing programming, if you start programs around the age of 0 or 1 up through kindergarten, surely we can be responsible for having children learn 8 nursery rhymes during the course of those, 4 or 5 years, because part of what we do is a lot of repetition. You don't have to keep reinventing the wheel with early learning programs. Kids need that repetition in order to learn. Earlier I had said they learn so much by the age of 5. They need the practice. They need that repetition to hear things over and over again, literally to cement it into their brain. So what I love to do with nursery rhymes is come up with books during programming that they can kind of take home and keep for themselves. So one way of doing it is 2 different types of programs you can do. One with Mother Goose books and another one called Messy Active Play. So with the Mother Goose books, I use just a legal size piece of Xerox paper, 8x14 white Xerox paper. I pick out 6 to 8 of my favorite rhymes. I try to pick well-known rhymes and not more of the esoteric ones that nobody really knows. So I'll have things like Baa Baa Black Sheep, The Itsy Bitsy Spider, Mary Had a Little Lamb, Humpty Dumpty, Hey Diddle Diddle, and we'll come up with different art activities and experiences, and I try to make it sensory based. So for example, at the Baa Baa Black Sheep table, they might have their piece of paper that has the rhyme written on it and an outline of a sheep. And then the child can scribble, they can color in the sheep, they can do whatever they want. And then we'll also put glue sticks and cotton balls and let them give the sheep a soft texture. For the Itsy Bitsy Spider, we might use aluminum foil to make the raindrops so that they get a bit of smooth and shiny. For the bricks on Humpty Dumpty's wall, I might cut up pieces of fabric, again, for them to pick and glue down. They can build patterns. They can have pieces of sandpaper, on there as well to use so that the bricks really have more of a rough texture, and you get to, these are all areas too where the parents can sit and talk to their kids, and what does that feel like, and what is that made out of, what do you think this is? And it's really a simple, pretty inexpensive program to do. So we have 6 to 8 rhymes, which means maybe I have 6 or 8 tables down on the floor spread around my room if I have a community room, or I'm just using the tables up in my children's department, and people are just moving table to table as they make their pages. And then the last table I always put by the door, and that's where we staple all of the pages together. And then we have all different colorful duct tape. They make duct tape in all different patterns and textures and colors these days, and we'll cover up and make a spine of the book to cover the staples so that the edge of it is safe and they're not going to get cut. And then they get to leave with their own nursery rhyme book that they get to take home and practice and share these rhymes together and read this book together. For some families, this might be their first book that they own or their child's first book. So it's a nice way of giving a book away without having to expend a lot of money on purchasing books. Messy active play is very similar in that instead of nursery rhymes at each table, we put a different sensory event at the table on the floor. So think a rice table, a water table, and the water table, again, might be plastic shoe bins filled with water. You know, kids, they don't need a lot of water to make a mess. So we just give little stations, sand, things that they don't get to play with often perhaps in a library setting, and we make it very sensory based, and we do call it messy active play so that hopefully they don't come wearing their most gorgeous clothing. So there's lots of other things you can do in story time, though, when we're talking about early learning. Multiple copies of board books are fabulous to model for parents because the library staff can model how to read the book for babies and toddlers. What I like to do is read it once with the words that the author put there, and then do it again, completely making it up myself, to again show parents it's okay to do that. People sometimes think libraries are very rule-based, and you have to read every word on the page, right? That's how the book was written, so I have to do it that way. It's really important for us as library staff sometimes to show parents that they can break the rules. You don't have to read every word on the page. You can skip around. You can make up your own story, and with babies and toddlers, that's entirely appropriate, again, as an early learning mechanism, is to use those pictures to create your own stories. A sneak peek of one of my favorite books recently, Flora and the Flamingo, is a adorable book that is wordless, and it's coming out this year as a board book, which will be really great for early learning opportunities because that one just has so much movement in it. You lift the flaps, and this little girl and the pink flamingo are doing ballet together. So you can just see these toddlers and preschoolers doing pliés and, you know, prancing around the library. That one's a really fun one to use together. So you might be asking yourself, why? Why do I need to do this in a library? Well, young children are obviously very curious people, and there was a study done that shows they ask an average, I was astounded when I saw this, 76 questions per hour. I think I was astounded because I must have blocked this out from when my own children were young and were asking me a gazillion times a day, why? So why do we need to do this in libraries? You know, what do kids really learn through play anyway? They learn a lot, and I think this is what, when we talk about that curiosity gap earlier, this is what it comes down to for me, is that kids today don't have those, quote, old-fashioned opportunities for play anymore, and that's what a public library can provide for them. They need to learn how to pick things up for their gross motor skills, their fine motor skills. You could argue that they're getting fine motor skills when they're swiping on the iPhone, but they're not getting those grasping skills anymore that they used to with those little fine details that they would pick up. Problem solving, learning how their world works. It can be boring to us sometimes, yes. We're older than them. We think we know everything. They're seeing everything for the first time through brand new eyes, and it really is exciting to them. So all of these different types of opportunities come out through play. And we can also, I think this is really important for parents and caregivers, that library staff, when you're running an early learning program, if you have to sell this to your administrators and they're like, what are you doing? You're just throwing some toys out on the floor and there's a group of parents and kids in there. Why do I need a professional staff member in there? Because this is what we need to teach parents. We're teaching parents and modeling for parents and caregivers how to communicate with their children effectively, what those every child ready to read techniques are. We're talking to them about why it's so important for them to be playing and singing and talking and reading with their children. We're obviously, you've seen this, you have 3 baby dolls in an early learning class and 4 children who want those baby dolls. They're learning conflict resolution early on. Parents need to learn this too. They need to kind of step back and let their children hash things out themselves, and a library, getting groups of people together, is a great place for that to happen. So much going on these days with STEAM and STEM learning of science, technology, education, engineering, arts, mathematics. It's not just about 3D printing, it's about playing too. There's technology and science in so much of early learning for kids. So we get to do all of these things when we are in the room with them. We're not just standing in there watching people play with their children. We're facilitating that group. We're hopefully walking around and giving little elevator speeches of, wow, when you're a child, did you see they just made a pattern? And when they're building with the blocks, they're learning this. And this is where all of those websites from earlier, like Ready to Read, the Babies Need Words website, you can get some great language. Saroj Goting's website is packed with early learning conversations that you can steal to share with parents, and the Every Child Ready to Read manual has them as well. We're community connectors. We should know who else is in our community besides the library? What other early learning groups are there, so that we can share that information with parents? We're not just about sharing books and DVDs and other materials. We're about sharing information as well. So in an early learning class, and this goes back to controlled chaos, it's going to be loud. It's going to be really loud sometimes, so it's not the best thing to split your community group and have your seniors on the other side of the wall playing bridge and your babies and toddlers playing on the other side, because it can get a little crazy loud. But this is some of what you would see and hear. You're going to have lots of responsive language instead of that directive language. You're going to have descriptive language, people walking around talking, what is this, what do you see, questions, lots of open-ended questions. Even when we're reading stories, you know, we're all trained to read from start to finish with no interruptions. That's not how a little kid's brain works. So we want to kind of try to retrain ourselves as professionals to ask those open-ended questions in the beginning of a book, perhaps in the middle. And yes, sometimes it does distract the group a little bit, and you get lots of non sequiturs, but that's where you kind of have to learn some skills on finagling the group and getting them back to the story. Like, okay, let's turn the page and see what really is going to happen. We want to be encouraging and show and model for parents and caregivers that babies, toddlers, preschoolers their noise, their questions, their mess, they do belong in libraries. Because they're going to grow up there. And ultimately, too, they're going to be your future library voters, hopefully. And this is why I also think early learning is a great advocacy program, because I want those families to think of the library first when it's essential services that they need for their kids. So here are some examples coming up, and these are fun, of controlled chaos and what it looks like. These are all library programs. Brooklyn Public Library does something, I believe they're doing, this is their 5th or 6th year, the Big Brooklyn Playdate. If it's bad weather, they do it inside, but sometimes they're able to do this outside at local parks. And it is a recycling love fest. You can see a parachute going on here, lots and lots of shredded paper. Get to know your business finance office, and when they start shredding documents, they're going to look at you strangely, but you're going to ask them for a couple of big bags of shredded paper, because how much fun is it as a little kid to have mountains and mountains of paper to go throw around. This is basically like bringing a leaf pile inside for kids to play with. The other thing that I like about this type of program is it shows parents you don't have to spend money on toys. The library itself does not have to spend a lot of money on toys. You're going to see a lot of creativity. Here's one from Camden County Library System in New Jersey that does a huge play date, again, all recyclables. They're saving their boxes. They're saving toilet paper tubes, wrapping paper tubes, tissue boxes, and those are the building blocks, and those are the creativity. I love in this picture the dad and the son in the back there that are building a ramp using a library chair that we all have from like the 1980s that's indestructible, a box and a tube to create some sort of ramp there. So you can do a lot just by saving materials and allowing people to explore and play. And then you're also showing parents, you can do this at home. You can save up a few boxes and on a rainy day throw them all into your living room and let the kids have this kind of open-ended, creative, imaginative play. This one I just adore. I think this is a great idea. So who knew that a plastic colander from the dollar store and a package of pipe cleaners could cause such concentration? The look on this little boy's face of having to thread the pipe cleaners in and out is just fabulous. So again, this could be in a messy active play program, like I mentioned earlier. This could be one station right there. Just a box of pipe cleaners, a couple of colanders. They thread them through. They can use the pipe cleaners to twist into letter shapes. The possibilities really are endless. Now, you might say, well, I don't have a community room. I don't have a dedicated programming room, and I'm always fighting with the adult department to find space in my library. So look at this picture right here. They are out on their public floor. They're using their children's room and the existing space that they have to have a PlayStation with their empty boxes and building blocks. Blocks, by the way, are one of the best early learning toys that you can get. A lot of libraries hesitate to buy the wooden unit blocks because, one, they're heavy and they're afraid that kids are going to throw them on the floor and get hurt, which, yes, sometimes happens. They're also expensive, the wooden blocks. So again, saving your plastic containers and your boxes and cereal boxes, tissue boxes, soup boxes of all sizes, they're not even wrapping them in paper. You could to make them pretty, but you could just use the things that you have already and have this great early learning opportunity for parents and caregivers to share together. This is the Indianhead Federated library system, again doing similar things, and the little baby on the corner there is using bubble wrap, and bubble wrap is an awesome mystery object for babies and toddlers. So when you get your Baker and Taylor and your Amazon boxes, save all that bubble wrap, and again, they get to pop it. You could have a jumping station where they jump on top of it, and how does that sound when I jump on it versus popping it with my fingers. You can take a square of bubble wrap and hair scrunchies and kind of make a paintbrush by scrunching up the bubble wrap, wrapping it with a scrunchie, and now you have a toddler-sized paintbrush that they can dab in paint, and they're going to make a texturized painting using bubble wrap instead of a traditional paintbrush, which also fine motor skills is more difficult, a pencil grip for them to have versus a just grasping, being able to use their larger motor skills to pick it up. So bubble wrap is always fun. And then we all have parents who they don't like mess, right? And sometimes there are kids that don't like mess too. Out in Tacoma Public Library System, my friend Kendra Jones has a blog, which is on your handout. She does fabulous early learning programs. She also is one of the Joint Chiefs of Storytime Underground, which is a fabulous place that you can send library staff. It's a website that you can do storytime training. They actually show you how to do story times on there. So she has some babies, toddlers, we all do, that don't like to get their hands messy, and or they have parents with OCD and the parents don't want the kids to get their hands messy. So she uses double Ziploc bags, a piece of paper, and 2 squirts of paint, yellow and blue. And voila, you put it in there, the kids get to mix up the paint and they get to see different colors made. She also had all these extra fabric hoops from a cross-stitching phase she told me she went through. And so she said, what can I do with all of these? And she got different fabrics with nubby fabric, smooth fabric, rough fabric, and made sensory hoops that, again, as an inexpensive kind of educational area that the kids can go through. This is in Calgary. Now here you'll see that they took their shredded paper to the next level and they purchased a plastic baby pool to put the paper in instead of water, which I thought was great. And in the upper hand corner, you can see again, they're doing this right on the public floor of the library. They're not in a community room, and they have what looks like sand on their floor. I'm sure I have some people shuddering right now, but they have plastic tablecloths down, and you can have mess in the library if you have a good vacuum cleaner and a supportive custodial staff. So it's always good people to be friendly with. And finally, I love the big box for even just having that, not in a program, but just getting one of those big, huge boxes and putting it in your public floor children's department. You know, maybe doing 1 or 2 cutouts and putting some crayons or duct tape, stickers, and letting the kids, as a community of kids, kind of create and build this little reading nook clubhouse that will last for a month or so. And then the beauty of cardboard boxes is they go away and you can get another one. So these are just different ideas. Finally, we're going to wrap up with looking at some STEM stations down in Montgomery County in Maryland. So they created 22 mini stations that they circulated throughout their library system that literally would just go in existing floor space of the children's department as passive programming for parents and caregivers to do with kids while they were in the library. So here you can see it is the windowsill countertop and a small table right in front with a little sign about dinosaur fossils, a magnifying glass, different things to look at, and then also a separate display actually up on the windowsill around the letter L. So it's a very small space, but they have this interactive exhibit that kids can use and explore together. This is also Montgomery Library System. Lakeshore Learning is one of my favorite catalogs, and you can get in their science section x-rays and photos of bones and insects and reptiles, and they're just using their existing windows to make this display, and then again on top of the bookcase in front of it putting up some books and information. And here the little girl is, the guessing game is in that black folder on the side of the photo. You have to guess which of the color photos matches the x-ray. So she's matching it up and it looks like she's correct. And finally, this is something that Nassau and Suffolk County did with their New York State Family Literacy Grant last year, is we gave away stacking cups as an early literacy prize, and we also made this card, double-sided index card, that gave parents some talking tips about ways that they can play and things that their children are learning when they play together. So we did that with our grant money. We got these cups from the catalog Noodle Soup, and I believe we got them down to $1 or $1.25. I want to say it was $1 an item, which was a pretty good price, but we were buying about 15,000 of them between the two library systems. So that's something that you could also look to do if you get a grant, is to have some early learning kind of giveaway items for reading clubs and things of that nature. So at this point, I'm going to open it up for questions there's the chat box, and you can kind of type right into there if anyone has any questions. I'd be happy to answer them.
And Lisa, this is Jeremy. I'm here too. I want to thank everybody for coming and remind folks that there's some handouts that Lisa has prepared for you that are available in the sidebar. You can click on those PDFs and download them for your use. And thank you all for coming. I think what we'll do is end the recording here, and then we'll take care of your questions.